Hey, what's up? It's Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb riffing on Monday, June 12th at approximately 1:20 p.m. my time. And it's been a little while since my last Truth Bomb. We have been interspersing them with these amazing, what we call Twitter bomb reflections from Roseanne Rabiola Mile, my partner in arms in this incredibly righteous grind. And I love it. She's this Spitfire, Mighty Mouse, 4'8" Italian woman from Chicago who spits out these Twitter bombs that I drop on Twitter. And it's just amazing. And I hope it catches on, and it's really a lot of fun for me to watch. But we're going to be interspersing those with our with my truth bombs from time to time. And the last truth bomb I did, and I kind of feel like that, somebody at church saying my last confession, was approximately a week and a half ago, and it was definitely one I'm proud of that I consider my magnum opus. And if you want to understand kind of my big picture scenario, I would encourage you to take a look at it at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. And I think it says the header is "The time is now." And the time is now every day. And if I could ask you to like and subscribe and share this, if it hits all the right points with you. But man, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like I am in this situation. I think the only time I've ever seen anything to this degree is in some sort of fictional depiction on a television series or a movie or something that encapsulates something that's so remarkably pressure filled because of the stakes are so high. Um, Myself and my team, and really millions of people out there who are unaware, but yet looking, I know they're looking for the information that I have, and yet we have yet to connect. And there's a lot of potential reasons for that, most of which I can only speculate. But all I can think about is, Huxley and Adolf Huxley and Orwell. I mean, those really fit the bill in terms of their descriptions and their masterpieces about the nature of power and psychology and conformity and disinformation and control and all of the dimensions of, I guess, the human experience in society and what the potentials are. And I find myself in the middle of that in the midst of all of the craziness that we all find ourselves in. And it's painful. It's extremely painful because there's no crystal clear map that gets you to the prize at the end of the game. Is there an end of the game? Is there victory? I don't know. I feel most of the time that I'm in this incredibly complex maze with these walls that seem to get higher and higher, and the goalposts of where I'm going move every time I seem to get close. And it's a mud bog at the same time, but yet you feel like the promised land is just over the wall, and you're like, do I just punch through? What is it that I have to do that's going to somehow miraculously trigger a domino to break through everything that I've spent the last year and a half trying to break through? And I'm constantly reminded that we've had on TikTok, for example, on Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con, over 7.5 million views, but they didn't translate to any real action. We're starting to see, and I should thank off the top, really all of you that have contributed to our effort to try to create a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption. And you have acted brilliantly and, helped us to get, a start, if you will. But I've been after it, I think, 3 months, and I think we've gotten up to about $2,500. And, the goal, just based on numbers, is, we got to get to about $20,000 to be able to do what I need to do, which is A, build a podcast, and C, grow, the audience for these incredibly important contextualized truths that answer the paradox of what literally millions are looking for. In fact, when you pull the lens back and you consider what all of the presidential candidates are talking about in one form or another, I've got the goddamn answers that every single one of them touch upon and then can't get there. And that's part of the game. And I'll address that a little bit later. But I want to just kind of pick up with all of the things that are happening. I mean, first and foremost, we're at a crossroads, and it's kind of the end of the line in some ways. And maybe it's the end of the line completely. I'm not quite sure what's going to play out in the next 2 weeks, but our work, my work, the monumental revelations from The Con, which is at www.thecon.tv, a 5-part, multi-part series that lays out the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, that has all of the answers that could take down the entire system of corruption. And I'm absolutely certain that I have been targeted by the, intelligence censorship complex. But it's also because I've seen in real time the sort of disconnect between people and what is actually our system, and what they're looking for. Because again, like I said, everybody's looking for how the system works and what happened to make the system rigged and how it's corrupt, but nobody has the patience or the wherewithal to be able to just plug in to what it is that I'm providing amongst this incredible ocean of madness, of noise and disinformation and misinformation, to where nobody can see the forest for the trees. And I think this is incredibly demonstrated by what we've seen since Friday as it relates to the 37 indictments of former President Donald Trump as it relates to top secret classified information that he stored in Mar-a-Lago. I've seen an array, a tidal wave, maybe thousands of comments that seem completely coordinated to me and organized on Twitter of people that are in this banality of lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. That this is weaponizing the Department of Justice to take out an innocent former president that did nothing wrong. Meanwhile, if you read the the indictment with 37 charges, you'd understand it's the easiest thing to read in the world. And by Donald Trump's own admission, he did exactly what he's accused of doing. I mean, this is an open and shut case. I mean, yes, we always say someone is presumed innocent until proven guilty because that's supposed to be our system. But what we've discovered and what I've discovered is the system, if it doesn't get the facts and the evidence and present them in a court of law that has integrity, then the truth is never found. And that's what Donald Trump banks on, is that nobody can wrap their head around of what the goddamn evidence is, which is black and white as it relates to this specific case. And I dare say in all of the other elements that he's been indicted on in the Southern District of Manhattan with Alvin Bragg, and things that seem to be coming down the pike with a potential RICO conviction or at least indictment in Georgia with Fonnie Willis. And then, of course, all of the, which is where my expertise lies, all of the elements of control fraud and Donald Trump's business practices that are, being investigated and I believe taken to the next phase of indictments through the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. I've read the complaint that has over 200 cases that span decades. So the point is, Donald Trump has been a criminal for decades, but he's gotten away with it. And what I can continue to reveal to you is I should thank Donald Trump, because he's a reflection of everything we are. And at best, he's a mid-level player. But given the monstrosity of so much of misinformation and everybody picking a side and using clickbait and different maneuverability and working around the systems, you wind up with these scenarios where it's like somebody who I used to have incredible respect for, a guy like by the name of Matt Taibbi, and everything that he's done throughout his career. And but that lands in a very peculiar configuration that, the way I define it, straight to the point, is that it's MAGA clickbait. Everything that ranges from, even though it's incredibly important information, the Twitter files and other things. But for example, Matt Taibbi, and then everybody who kind of follows Matt Taibbi in the echo chamber, whether it's Russell Brand or Jimmy Dore, and quite frankly, Glenn Greenwald and some others that are all incredibly intelligent and smart guys, as well as Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate. But they want to say that there's no collusion between Russia and Trump. Meanwhile, the most obvious connection between Trump and Putin is Deutsche Bank. I mean, it's like kids play from this last indictment at Mar-a-Lago, and people of the United States versus Donald Trump, and it's that straightforward. But again, it's about getting the facts and elevating them to a place that they're bulletproof. And when you have the facts, it's just like I've said many times in these truth bombs. It's the murder weapon. You get intent, you get opportunity, you get motive, and the last piece is, I think, probably opportunity. I know there's four aspects of mens rea, actus rea, and all of the elements of an investigation. But when you find the murder weapon and you find the fingerprints and you find the DNA and you find the emails, and then you have more blockbuster revelations, you can prove guilt. Just because someone says they're not guilty doesn't make them not guilty. That's the whole point of our justice system, and that's what's on display. But what's amazing, as it relates to just this confangled madness in terms of what I'm in the midst of, reveals kind of in some ways, if you didn't understand the details of what I'm saying, it just goes to the point of what Donald Trump's been talking about the whole time. And I should give him some more props for the one thing that Donald Trump actually did get right, which was media is full of shit. And he's played them like a fiddle the whole time. Not because he's innocent, not because he's a good guy, but because he's actually the worst vulgar expression of everything that knows how to use it to his benefit, and he has for decades, hence the position we're in. But I'll switch subjects to kind of demonstrate, if I may, something that has gotten a lot of attention for millions of people out there that's happening on an ongoing basis that seems to be growing with its sort of composite interest level, and something I've had interest in. It's going to sound a little bit wacky at first, but please bear with me as I try to unpack this to try to make the corollary to why it is that what we have with the con is the most important information that reveals the entire system that nobody can understand. So I'll switch to this whole situation that's ongoing regarding UFOs that have been renamed, which I really think this is a much better name, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And over the course of this last weekend, a whistleblower, a guy by the name of David Grush, comes out on this platform called Newsmax, and he just makes these statements that the United States is in possession of 12 vehicles that aren't of man-made origin, and that we also have bodies of aliens in our possession. But then when asked if he has firsthand evidence of it that he can reveal, or if he actually himself observed what it is he's saying that he claims, he can't. He's relying on the testimony of others that are credible, and apparently this guy is pretty credible too, but he's making some monumental proclamations that millions of people are responding to because there's been questions for decades and decades and decades. Now, a lot of people could just kind of go, yeah, whatever. There are no UFOs. There are no aliens. And yeah, I can maybe see that maybe there's hundreds of millions of planets and stars in our own galaxy that percentage-wise, maybe there's an opportunity for a planet in the Goldilocks zone that could create life. But, then you'd have to be able to travel at least 4 million light years. And if you do the math, that doesn't make any sense in terms of a humanoid being able to come here in small craft, for example. And, there's always some sort of answer, but yet there's so much interesting evidence out there. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from in this particular example. So back in 1991, I was hanging out with my buddy Nate, and we were climbing Red Rocks in a beautiful place called Sedona, Arizona. And Sedona has an incredible reputation for it's a very spiritual place. It's got a lot of mythical things that happen there, a lot of, new age type stuff. And I spent a lot of time there because I went to Arizona State University, and I just absolutely love Sedona, which has now become kind of like this playground of the ultra rich, as are all the great places on earth. But back in 1991, my buddy Nate and I were scaling around on these really cool vertical outcroppings at a place called the Wagon Wheel Vortex. And I'll never forget being on the side of this cliff. It was like a 50-foot cliff, and I'm looking for the next handhold. And I noticed this white light appeared above my head. And I was like, well, that's interesting. It's like, why would I see, a star or a planet that had some sort of reflection? I went through all of the things that it might be, including some sort of weather balloon. But then as I started to stare at it more, I started to see strange colors. And it was silent and it seemed very peculiar. Like there was this sort of visual, I don't know, like it was really messing with my head because, like, again, I couldn't tell if it was out in outer space or if it was nearby. Like the distance seemed very difficult for me to gauge. And then I started seeing these strange colors. So I leaned over to my buddy. Well, I didn't lean over. I mean, we were both on this rock face trying to figure out. And it was a complicated climb. And I said, "Hey, man, do you see that?" And my buddy was like, "Yeah." And so we stared at it for a while. And then suddenly we were like, well, it's not threatening and there's nothing we can do about it. And we don't know what it is. So keep climbing. So we climbed up to the precipice of this really cool rock outcropping. And we sat there and we pulled up our ropes and we were just hanging out there. And we looked up again and it's literally there. But I'm like, "Hey, Nate, man, do you see it changing colors?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, all right, what the hell is that?" So the next thing I know, we're getting all of our gear. We climb down the mountain. We walk through the pathway to my car. And there the light is, equidistant, again, like literally hovering right above us. And we're like, what is that? But we don't know what we can do. And it's not threatening, but we have no description. So that's all we can do. So we get in my car. We're listening to music. I'm driving down the canyon. And we're still staring periodically and we're just looking at each other. And by this time, an hour later, we're literally not saying anything anymore because there's nothing left to say. And then suddenly, and I swear to God, this happened. It just went, boing, and it disappeared up into the heavens. That was 6 years before the infamous Phoenix Lights. And I had been kind of obsessed with this for a long time because the first thing that happened, because I had had a private pilot's license at the time, and I've done a lot of flying, and I know the basics of aeronautics, and I knew that wasn't something that operates within gravity and physics, given everything I know about the four forces of flight, and yet it didn't have any emissions either. So the first thing that popped into my mind is A, what is it, and B, what is its propulsion? And so fast forward to a lot of things have happened in the last couple of years. I mean, there's been things happening the whole time anyway. But of course, the New York Times and Leslie Kean, and I can't remember the other journalist, but they revealed that the United States Navy had all sorts of sightings, including what manifested with Lieutenant Graves in the naval incident, the carrier group down in the Baja that's known as the TikTok, that was discussed thoroughly with Joe Rogan a few years ago prior to the New York Times article landing. And then, of course, I think there was, I said Fravor, so he was in the Pacific. And then I think Graves was the guy at the carrier group in the Carolinas. And he revealed similar sightings and more, footage. And all of these things kind of came down the pike. And then last summer, the mainstream media started to do things that they haven't done the last, 50 years and give it some sort of credibility. And we found out that there's these specific investigation committees within the Pentagon, and what they know and what they don't know, and whistleblowers and insights. So a lot of amazing information. And, that all led into this guy, David Grush, revealing that, we have these things. And so it's created a buzz, but yet when you listen to all of these different sort of spokes in the wheel and the different satellites of the story, everybody's got an angle and everybody's trying to cover this stuff and everybody's trying to deal with like the evidence that's out there, all of the perplexing questions. And yet there's kind of a consensus that there's a grand cover up. And what the hell is it? And so it's gotten more and more credibility because of guys in the system from the Pentagon and guys like Mellon is his last name, Chris Mellon, and some other folks in that, scenario. And I could go on naming names and all that, but that's not really the gist of what I want to reveal to you. But I will pick up on slightly, more things because of just how so much information is involved with this at the moment. Today, this guy, Stephen Greer, who's been around for a long time and who did a disclosure project, he's a former emergency medical doctor and who had an experience himself, and he started to go down this path, and he's obviously an intelligent guy. And back in 2001, he introduced at the National Press Club 75 whistleblowers to get the first sort of global consensus that something's happening and that needs to be investigated. And so now it's 2023, and Greer is continually providing more and more information. And he checked off all the boxes a long time ago of the same questions that I asked back in 1991. What's the propulsion? What's the energy? What is it? And anybody who has any kind of basic understanding of science and galaxy and physics and gravity and all of those things that are involved in distances, you have to just go with the basic questions of I just realized I just revealed. And this guy Stephen Greer, in his conversations and his work and everything else, I mean, he goes to the nth degree, which is really where you have to go when you start to open up the door to these questions. It's like, okay, who knows what this is? Who has the technology? And if it's the technology we think it is, could that change humanity forever? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, when I do the big rewind in this whole thing, I just think that maybe I saw a drone. Now, whether or not it was a drone of this earth is the question. And if, for example, there are aliens, there's no way they traveled light years and light years in those tiny craft to get here. And all of the other composite questions. My point isn't to disseminate the UAP, quite frankly, controversy and circus that exists in a way that it never has before in our modern lifetimes, but it's technology that's brought this all to the fore. So it's just more and more and more questions. But when you take in the kind of the composite of, okay, Donald Trump and all things, is he hiding things, or is he telling the truth? And there's millions of people that follow Donald Trump because they don't have the capacity to understand just basic facts, let alone do they understand the nature of how power works and what's legal and what's not legal. And so they're buying a bunch of propaganda from Trump and his orbit. Sorry to use the pun, but when you plug that into the sort of the dystopia, if you will, in the UAP world and everything that's coming at us, especially online media, people get really confused and frustrated and desperate and convinced about specific things that may or may not be. But when you don't have the facts and you don't have the evidence, the mind is going to go a million different places and it can get fractured, especially if you put on top of it, the type of outcome where people are desperate and, living through extraordinarily difficult circumstances, for example, which then as a political sort of body can come in the form of what appears to be what is growing with exuberance, which for somebody like myself is unacceptable, but it's also terrifying and also mind-numbingly horrific, is that we've got Nazis showing themselves in front of Walt Disney World this weekend. As a result of everything that I've been trying to explain to you and express to you, that corruption births and fuels fascism. This isn't the first time this has happened in history. In fact, it's happened more times than not. The easiest to understand and study completely soup to nuts is the rise of the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler and everything that happened in that time period. And there's way too many parallels. Now, do I think Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler? No, I do not. He's nowhere near the visionary, unfortunately, and I don't want to give any credence to Adolf Hitler, but he was an architect, and he was a thespian, if you will, and he was a poet, and all sorts of other manner, shape, size of building a vision to be able to deliver. And then the thing that Hitler knew above all else was violence. You get a lot of people to believe in your thing, and you kill everybody else. People are going to get in line. They're going to get complicit. They're going to be conformist real quick, which is what is on display right now. And that's unacceptable. And that's what I'm fighting against above all else, but that's because I've got the answers to corruption. I've got the evidence of everything that took place to create the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that involves everybody in power. Both sides of the political divide for the last 4 or 5 decades that were involved with covering this whole thing up. And quite frankly, when you get to the end of this, it's almost as unbelievable to the uninformed as finding a UFO and aliens in our midst. I mean, it seems that ridiculous, but it's so simple when you have the evidence and you understand what the facts are. Now, I'm not saying that aliens exist and we have the evidence. I'm saying that I had a personal experience. I can calculate in my mind that there's a good chance that we've seen intelligent societies throughout billions of years of evolution in the heavens that, probably many societies have come and gone, and we could talk about that all day. Does that mean that I believe that we have evidence of UFOs with alien life on this planet? I don't know that. I haven't seen that evidence. I've seen a lot of things that tickle my fancy and I find it interesting, but that's not my point. I do have the evidence of exactly what created the 2008 great financial crisis and ultimately what happened in the aftermath. You got to understand monetary policy. You got to understand the law. You got to understand all manner, shapes, or form of the economy and finance and the law to understand what it is that makes up the whole of corruption. And if you don't understand that, then the con is your vehicle to understand that because it lays out the evidence of A plus B equals C in about as easy to an understand platform as, quite frankly, the indictments of United States versus Donald Trump. So let's go to the other sort of headline that's out there that kind of encompasses, what I just mentioned, right? In terms of something that we're seeing play out both in the kind of mainstream platform and then also the alternative, reactionary universe online. And that's all things Epstein. So today, as it turns out, Chase agreed to a $290 million settlement for the victims of their involvement with Epstein. Now, just last week or 2 weeks ago, Deutsche Bank, the same bank that I just demonstrated or mentioned is the connection between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, they paid $75 million to the victims, and I think they paid $150 million fine for whatever act that they admitted to prior to this. And so now we've got Chase with a $290 million settlement. Least we forget, by the way, that Fox had a $787 million settlement only about a month ago, basically admitting everything that we learned that their role was hiding and furthering the lie of what the Dominion voting booths were, what they knew and what they didn't know by way of the narrative that they were, selling their audience that the election was stolen, which, as it turns out, was a lie. And how do we know that? Because the CEO, Rupert Murdoch of News Corp, the owner of Fox Network, said it was their business model to lie. So yeah, when media lies, people get confused. The fourth estate is supposed to be not about eyeballs and money, but the facts. But then, of course, we have a free society where you can choose what you're going to pay attention to. But more and more, what we've seen are those that are supposed to demonstrate the facts have skewed into this world that plays this game for eyeballs and clicks that has nothing to do with the facts. Meanwhile, I've got the facts of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history, and then we're dealing again with the New York Times today doing exactly what Donald Trump has accused them of being, fake media. Because in the New York Times revelation of what happened in the Epstein case as it relates to Chase, one, they said Epstein hung himself. Do we know that Epstein hung himself? They said it definitively. He hung himself. I guess they're going with what the government told them, though. But it seems odd, and I'm not sure if Epstein hung himself. He may have been helped to hang himself. Given everything I've seen about Epstein, I find it hard to believe that guy would actually commit suicide, given everything that he seemed to be in it for himself throughout the years. But the interesting thing about this revelation of a $290 million settlement from Chase Bank today is the nature of what mainstream media tells us and what actually was going on. So, for example, again, the New York Times said that Epstein hung himself. Okay. Then they said that maybe Chase, and they didn't say who, was informed by somebody. They gave the name, but they didn't say he was general counsel, and they didn't say what his proximity was to Jamie Dimon. But he had warned them that Epstein was up to no good. But for anybody who understands, and this wasn't in the article of the New York Times today, is that Jamie Dimon has been involved with questionable stuff for now 3, 4 decades. And also, Chase has been indicted and convicted on 5 criminal indictments in the course of the last 7 years, including a RICO violation of insider trading and from insider trading as it relates to metals trading. And also, that goes to the $13 billion settlement that Chase paid to cover up what Elaine Flashman, a whistleblower of the 2008 great financial crisis, revealed. And then she goes away and they pay the $13 billion settlement. And that's that. And the New York Times has literally been lying about Jamie Dimon ever since. And that's problematic when you're trying to deconstruct a story that has all sorts of very peculiar connections to things that the United States might actually be. Now, over the course of the last many, many years, it's been revealed that the financial system of the United States has been very much like Switzerland operated, dealing with dark money, dealing with illegal money from around the world and laundering that money for a number of reasons. And one of these things might be connected to Epstein. We know, many people know, that Jamie Dimon was involved with Bernie Madoff, and Bernie Madoff was a Ponzi scheme. It goes on and on and on. And yet, the mainstream media makes a posit about things that we're supposed to accept as fact when we know so much more information than the New York Times is revealing to us. So if the New York Times isn't willing to tell us the truth about Jeffrey Epstein and Chase, is it possible there's other things that they might not be interested in telling us the truth about? I mean, it's from Donald Trump's ears to the world, right? Nobody got to the bottom of 9/11, so what are you going to do? Look, we're in a time period where everything is insane. And the presidential candidates, particularly those that are going to be running for the Democratic, for the Democrats, the likes of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and, of course, Cornel West and Marianne Williamson, they're all talking about corruption. But none of them know the details of the corruption that I'm revealing to you. Now, they're all very, very intelligent. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is incredible on so many fronts, and he can lay out the evidence and the detail in a very thought-provoking sort of framing and everything else. And I don't agree with him about everything, but some stuff I'm like, wow, that was interesting. And he is literally running on a campaign of truth. And I have access to Robert F. Kennedy and Jr., and I hope to be able to help him understand the truth of what we've compiled. But I happened to be talking to one of his top people the other day, and he did reveal to me that there are some truths that are just too much at the moment, that you really can't get the American people's minds around. And, was he inferring the con? Maybe to a degree. We kind of had that conversation, but not necessarily. But, Dr. Cornel West is unbelievably brilliant as anybody I've ever come across. And he's a poet, and his humanitarian platform and what he does is so inspiring. But at the same time, he talks about systemic corruption, and he doesn't understand systemic corruption. He doesn't understand the details. Same with Marianne Williamson. We've got the details in the con, but the con is about to go away. Why? Because it's a loud universe. There is no market for the truth. There is only a market for lies and misinformation. And you can fill in your own definition of psychology to make yourself think, yeah, well, that's a possibility. No, that's the way it is. The truth has no value. We're going to pull the con. It's going to be erased from history unless a miracle happens. But I'm on the doorstep of that right now, and it's very, very, very tough to accept. I've been on this journey. It almost destroyed my life in 2008. I got a miraculous opportunity to pull the thread, and I went out and I found all the answers, and we did it. We did the work that the United States government failed to do. That gets paid $90 billion a year to do what we did for $4.5 million. And we spent $4.5 million to get the $29 trillion truth, which is now the $70 trillion truth. And it's going to disappear from history because there's no market for the truth. People aren't seeking it out. And platforms certainly don't want to air it, at least those that are connected to all of the entities that we reveal that completely own the United States. The financial sector owns the United States. They're above the law. It's a criminal racketeering enterprise that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to back a racketeering enterprise. And that's reality. So where do we go from here? Well, we're passing around a petition. We have been. We've got about 312 signatures on it. Should have, based on the numbers that I've seen. I mean, there's over 50 million Americans that got devastated by the 2008 great financial crisis. You'd think we'd be able to get 5,000 signatures, but no, we haven't. But we have it on my Twitter page and others that I'm involved with, their Twitter page today. So we'll see how many signatures we can get on a petition to try to not have the con get pulled from the public. And I'm trying to create this tidal wave, populist wave. My mind's all over the map right now. My thinking isn't clear because it's just so frustrating, all of this stuff. Have you ever put your life on the line for something? Have you ever sacrificed everything that's important to you to get the truth? I have. It doesn't matter. And I've got to come to grips with that unless you change that. So if you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, that believes in decency, dignity, liberty, and sustainability and integrity, and we come together in unity, we will purge the misery of tyranny. And that is our destiny. That's the Clean New Deal. We're smart enough to figure this out. But the problem is those who have control of power, those who have been able to grift their way to being above the law, and I'm talking about the power. I'm talking about the financial power. It's the financial power. It's the intelligence power. It's the military industrial power. It's the fossil fuel power. It's pharmaceutical power. It's all the power, the corporate grift that has complete control, and they're not relinquishing it. But you can't defeat what you don't understand. And so I'm asking you to consider investing $13 because this is in honor of the original 13 colonies that came together to break the grip of tyranny of King George III and the East India Trading Company and the Redcoats, which was the most powerful force in the world at that time, and our founding fathers defeated them. They're the original 13 colonies. And yeah, a whole lot of stuff happened after the fact, but they rose to the moment. They had the courage, they had the vision, they had the fortitude, they had the stamina. They defeated tyranny. And that wasn't the first and last time. That wasn't the last time our country would demonstrate that. We've got to do it again. My point is that billionaires spend billions to grift trillions because of corruption. We spent $4.5 million to bring the $29 trillion truth to the world, which means that if 347,000 of you at $13 contributed, we'd be at the same level. I don't expect that at the moment. I'd certainly like to grow that, but we just need, somewhere in the 1,200 range right now to get on first base, and we'll continue being able to move the ball down the field. And if we can, then we can build this tidal wave resurgence to purge corruption. But if not, then if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, did it fall? Well, of course it did. But it didn't fall to the tool in the full circus who can't see the forest for the trees. Man, these are part pep speeches and part, Debbie Downers and all of the rest of it. And I don't script them, but yet it's the answer to every question everyone is looking for. And all of the parallels are around us. Can I get you to come on board? Do you hear it in my voice that I'm losing my voice? I'm losing my objective, my hope to keep soldiering on, because this is a heavy weight to bear. And I've already lost so much already. But I want us to be redeemed. I want to be redeemed. I know we can defeat corruption, but it's going to take millions of us. And it's not about me. You plus me equals we the people. Failure is not an option. Rise, war, revolt, onwards and upwards.